Two Americans went abroad looking for adventure, and instead, they found love.
They met overseas in Germany. They shared a common experience.
Their love is very intense.
This is what you have been waiting for your entire life.
But back home, a tragedy lay in wait.
He was stabbed in the face.
It is a scene that no one should have to see.
It's just, wow, that was brutal.
Was their picture-perfect life all a lie?
There was an affair going on.
Don't even try it.
There was a great deal of secrecy.
Will investigators be able to expose the truth?
There are circumstances where people think they're going to be smarter than the evidence.
Or will justice be thwarted by a killer's deceit?
Who was the aggressor?
The way it all ends, it shocks people.
December 13th, 2013. The holiday season is in full swing in Laurel, Maryland, a city of 25,000 that's home to many of the state's military families.
Laurel is just outside of Washington, D.C., and just off the Fort Meade military base.
There's a lot of military families come to this area for work.
You see this community that's in a celebratory mood where there are Christmas decorations up, a seemingly nice place.
But this year, a call to the Anne Arundel County Police Department puts a damper on the holiday cheer.
The police department was called for a suspicious missing person.
The 911 caller said her name was Laura Jennings, and she was a sergeant major stationed at Fort Meade. She told police that a soldier under her command had disappeared.
I have an off-base soldier who's gone AWOL. I'd like to request a welfare check.
The missing soldier is 38-year-old Sergeant First Class Johnny Sutton III. And according to his commanding officer, he's been unreachable for more than 24 hours.
Johnny hadn't reported for duty the day before, and he had stopped responding to her calls and texts.
Seems like strange behavior.
Yes, it is. He's one of my most reliable men.
She noted that it was uncommon for him to not return calls, not show up to work.
She was concerned, and she requested that police go by Johnny's home to perform a welfare check.
Does the sergeant live with anyone else?
Yes, sir, he does. He has a wife and baby. I haven't been able to get a hold of her either.
Okay, ma'am, we'll send someone right out.
Okay, thank you.
Half an hour later, Anne Arundel County Police are standing outside Johnny's townhouse. But when they knock, no one answers the door.
The fact that the military was involved meant that this investigation could move a little bit faster than it would have otherwise. And so the police immediately contacted the property manager to let them into Johnny's home.
Inside, everything appears to be in order.
They didn't notice anything on the first floor that was out of place. Looked like a normal house.
But something horrific awaits them upstairs.
When they walked into the bedroom, they were stopped dead in their tracks.
There's what looks like the body that is wrapped in trash bags.
It's eerie. It was like, wow, what happened here?
Strapping and 6'2", Florida native Johnny Sutton was as handsome as he was charming.
He was very likable to other people, sparked up conversations, created friends wherever he went.
He often was the life of the party.
Everyone loved him. No one had anything negative to say about him.
While his fellow soldiers knew him as Sergeant Sutton, to his family, he would always be Johnny Boy.
That's what they called him when he was growing up in Miami. He was a bright kid, and they had a lot of high hopes for him.
So he graduated from high school and enlisted, and he went off to the military.
His parents supported that dream, and Johnny grew up to be a responsible, disciplined young man.
Part of the attraction was that he got to travel, and he was stationed all over, Korea, Iraq.
He was taking on his dream of being in that world and seeing the world.
Johnny was also fulfilling his family's legacy.
The growth that he went through as he enlisted in the Army was very evident to his family.
He worked his way up to becoming a program analyst on different civil works projects, and he kept climbing that ladder.
He was a very heavily decorated individual.
But a life in the military meant that Johnny was never in one place for long, a fact which made it difficult for him to succeed in one area of his life.
He got married young and had a child, but the constant deployments took a toll on that relationship, and it ended in divorce.
Johnny was known to be a very loving person, and after coming from a breakup like that, he was looking for companionship, looking for love.
He found it in an unlikely place.
He went overseas to Germany.
He was stationed at an American military base there, and that's where he met a gorgeous young woman named Marquita Berry.
How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. My name is Johnny.
Hi, Johnny. My name is Marquita.
Nice meeting you, Marquita. You know, I seen you around base, and I just want to come say hello to you.
Well, I'm glad you did.
Over long months away from home, Johnny and Marquita's friendship grew into something more.
They're in a foreign land. They don't speak the language. And here is this person who comes along, who looks like me, who understands.
They click very quickly. It was almost love at first sight.
And when Fort Meade called Johnny back to the States a year later, Marquita was by his side.
They got married, got their first apartment.
We did it.
We did.
We did it.
Soon, the happy couple was welcoming a new addition to the family.
A year later, they are excited to announce the birth of their first son.
With Johnny as the breadwinner, Marquita was free to concentrate on their baby boy.
She decided to be a stay-at-home mom.
The couple moved from their first apartment into a townhouse.
They were just building this beautiful white picket fence life, and nothing could stop them.
But now, what appears to be a dead body has been found inside the young parents' home.
They know that Johnny and Marquita and their young son live in the home. They're not really sure whose body is wrapped in trash bags.
But one thing is obvious.
There's blood splattered on the wall.
There is the slight smell of bleach.
This is a murder.
Sergeant First Class Johnny Sutton and his wife Marquita seemed to have it all.
Johnny's military career was really taking off, and that set them up for a bright future.
They come to Maryland and they get their first apartment, and a while later, their first son is born.
But now, Anne Arundel County Police have discovered a dead body on the floor of the couple's bedroom.
They are aware of whose home they're in, but they don't really know whose body they have found in the master bedroom. Because the body has been wrapped in trash bags and blankets.
When detectives arrive, they head straight for the victim's body.
They wanted to figure out who this person is and exactly what they were dealing with.
Police are able to cut open the bags and reveal the body that's inside of them, and it is identified as Johnny Sutton III.
Let's go ahead and get this body moved over to the coroner's office, please.
And with their victim identified, a new question arises.
The first thought would have been, hey, where's the wife and kid?
It's important to find those individuals first to ensure that they're okay.
Police immediately get to work tracking down Marquita and her child.
They tried calling her cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail.
You're trying to find out who are the relatives, who's close to this individual, because you need to start to touch those people.
They end up filing a missing persons report for Marquita and her son.
Meanwhile, after the body is removed for autopsy, homicide detectives comb through the couple's bedroom.
There is blood smear on the wall. There is the slight smell of bleach.
and they see that there were some efforts to clean up some of the scene.
It's a clue that appears to rule out one common motive.
In the regular break-in, they won't take the time to cover a body or do certain things.
We knew we didn't have any sort of violent burglary sprees that had been going on in the area, so this was unusual.
And it looks like Johnny's killer had planned to do more than just cover his body with blankets and plastic.
There is a hacksaw and a box cutter that is sitting on the dresser, which indicates that someone may have been planning to dismember the body.
But there's one weapon the killer didn't leave behind.
His body has been cut, stabbed, and so police also noticed that in the kitchen, the knife block was missing the largest knife, and they wonder if this could be the murder weapon.
If I walked into a situation where I see that, I would automatically think this is someone that knows him.
That would also suggest that this homicide is personal. Someone would have to have a lot of rage to look a person in the eye and stab them to death.
Anyone that's close to him, friends and family, contacted him in the last week or so, probably would have been a suspect.
The detectives decide to start by interviewing the couple's neighbors.
Johnny and Marquita hadn't been living in the neighborhood long, but everyone said they seemed like nice, respectable family people.
And to the detectives' disappointment, no one has noticed anything suspicious in the last few days.
There was nothing that would indicate that there was anything to raise any red flags or any points of concern for any of the neighbors.
They also have no idea where Marquita or her son could be.
I haven't seen Marquita and the baby in a while.
No one had seen any of the Suttons around in several days.
While Johnny's neighbors may be a dead end, there's someone else who still might be able to help the investigation.
The detective asked the person who reported Johnny missing, his commanding officer, Laura Jennings, to come in for an interview.
Laura is floored when the police tell her what they found.
Sergeant Major, I regret to inform you that Johnny is dead.
He's dead?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Laura's in disbelief when she hears what happened to Johnny.
She says that her last interaction with him was via text.
It would have been Thursday morning. He didn't report for duty. I was just trying to get a hold of him.
Failure to report for duty in the Army is a major offense, and she tried giving Johnny one last chance before she sent it up the chain of command.
He sent a message saying that something was going on with the baby, that the baby was sick, and they were going to take him to the hospital. He said that he would keep her updated.
But Laura says that's the last she heard from him.
I was concerned. It wasn't like Sergeant Sutton.
After a while not hearing from Johnny or from the family, she visits the home to do a wellness check herself and see if she could get in contact with anyone. She waited for, I think, like an hour and a half to see if anyone came home, and there was no signs of anyone at the house.
After 24 hours, I called you.
At that point, Johnny was considered AWOL, and she was able to officially report it.
Laura says she has no idea who would want to hurt Johnny.
He was a good soldier, a good dad.
He was well-liked in his community, well-liked by his co-workers.
But there's something I should tell you.
There was a rumor that she heard.
Johnny wasn't entirely faithful.
There's another woman in the picture.
After finding U.S. Army Sergeant Johnny Sutton stabbed to death in his home, Anne Arundel County Police are on a frantic hunt for his missing wife Marquita and their young son.
When you get to a crime scene like that, not only are you thinking about, okay, who did this to him, but who else might live with this person, and are they in danger?
In the meantime, Johnny's commanding officer has revealed that he may have been having an affair.
It was just a rumor that she'd heard around base, but she thought it was important to tell detectives.
Did you hear who he supposedly had an affair with?
Yes.
It was the woman named Gloria Moss.
She works on base with us at Fort Meade.
An affair on the side would be, hey, This shows a red flag of, this might be something.
Thanks again for coming in. I'll walk you out.
They need to find out because they could possibly have their suspect.
That evening, police bring Gloria Moss in for an interview. But before they can ask their first question, she breaks down.
Everyone's talking about Johnny at the base. I still can't believe it.
She admits that they had a romantic relationship and that had been going on for several months.
But Gloria tells investigators that their connection was more emotional than physical.
Their relationship had become sexual only twice. Once in October, they met at a hotel, and a week before the murder, they took a trip together to Ocean City.
Did his wife know about the affair?
Not sure.
Gloria says it's not something she worried about because according to Johnny, his marriage to Marquita was all but over.
They were fighting all the time until she moved out.
Wait, so are you saying they were separated?
Yeah, I mean, kind of.
Gloria tells police Marquita had been back in the house with Johnny about a month.
Marquita had been staying with her mom, but that situation had fallen apart. So Johnny agreed to let her stay with him until she could find another place.
You have to start asking those questions. Did he tell you he wasn't going to leave his wife? And did that give you a reason to want to harm him?
At a certain point, they just straight up asked Gloria if she was involved in the death of Johnny or the disappearance of his wife and child.
Absolutely not.
But is she telling the truth?
Could she have really wanted to be in this relationship with Johnny, or was she just trying to cover up her involvement in his murder?
The investigators aren't sure, but without more evidence, they're forced to let Gloria go.
The next morning, they started to follow up on the claims about the marital strife between Johnny and Marquita.
Background checks on the couple reveal that Gloria may have been telling the truth.
There were several reports of domestic incidents at Marquita and Johnny's old apartment, one of which seemed especially serious.
It escalated to the point where Johnny had been taken into custody.
Detectives reach out to the caller who had reported the domestic disturbance.
They talked to the neighbor who was living under them when they were living in the apartment.
Yeah, I remember them. Especially him.
She was not a fan of Johnny.
The neighbor talked about how they were constantly fighting, constantly arguing.
Look, I just know he was hitting her. And that's why I called the police.
But she says when she approached Marquita about the abuse, she denied it.
She said that what the neighbor was actually hearing was the family playing video games, and she was mistaken in thinking that they were fighting.
The neighbor wasn't convinced, but she never got the chance to dig deeper.
One day he came over and told me to mind my own business.
The woman's impression of Johnny contradicts everything else police have heard about the decorated service member.
His Army co-workers, supervisors, they all see Johnny as this great guy, but people that's close by, such as neighbors, they have a different side of that story.
There was this abusive side, controlling side, aggressive side of him.
Which suggests there was some truth in what Gloria Moss said about the couple's troubled relationship.
There was the pretty face that the Suttons presented to the public, and then there was the truth. And it was starting to look like the truth was not very pretty.
Investigators also know that it doesn't take much for domestic violence to spiral out of control.
Misplaced anger starts to just settle in, and next years and years of trauma with that situation can turn deadly.
Yet with no sign of Marquita, police can only speculate.
For all they knew, Marquita and her son could also be victims.
But the next morning, everything changes.
Police are sitting down at their desks when an officer escorts someone in to talk with them.
It's Marquita Sutton.
She's looking for the officers who are investigating her husband's murder.
We've been looking for you and your son.
I know.
She does let the officers know that her son is safe, that he is in the care of family members.
Then she says something that takes them by surprise.
She says that she knows exactly who killed her husband.
It was me.
After disappearing days earlier, Marquita Sutton has resurfaced to claim responsibility for the killing of her husband, Johnny.
Mrs. Sutton came forward and confessed to the crime.
She basically turned herself in.
But Marquita tells the detectives that she's no murderer.
She admits to stabbing her husband, but she says it's self-defense.
It's a claim that her physical condition seems to support.
Her arm is in a sling. She has various scratches and bruises.
She looked like she'd been through hell.
When police ask her to explain what happened, Marquita takes them back to the beginning of the relationship.
The abuse has been going on for a long time.
Marquita and Johnny had a passionate relationship, but part of that was a pattern where Johnny would get physical with her and then beg Marquita for forgiveness.
She would take him back. Things would go back to being nice for a while, till they weren't again.
A week earlier, she says things took a turn for the worse when she caught Johnny in a lie.
Johnny said that he was going to an amateur photography conference in New Jersey, but because he wasn't giving her any information about where he was staying and he wasn't answering his phone, she decided to turn on the family locator service for their cell phones.
She learned that he was in Ocean City, New Jersey, instead of in New York, where he said he would be. Marquita said that she had long suspected that Johnny had been cheating on her, and this was all the confirmation that she needed.
When he got home, she confronted him about the infidelity.
Where were you at?
He immediately got angry.
Don't even try it, Johnny, because I know. I used the locator to track you.
You were spying on me?
The situation escalated quickly.
He strangled her, almost to the point where she passed out.
Afterwards, Johnny begged her to forgive him.
I'm so sorry.
He said he was sorry, and he admitted that he was having an affair with his co-worker, Gloria Moss.
Marquita says that Johnny also promised to cut ties with Gloria.
He said he wanted to be with Marquita, and he wanted to work on their marriage, so she decided to give him one more chance.
But just 2 nights later, she says Johnny's dark side reared its head again.
She says that they decide to have a romantic evening together.
Candles.
Yeah.
Okay, I see you went all out.
Anything for my baby.
Okay, I feel that.
Everything was going fine until Johnny wanted to become intimate.
I'm not ready for this, Johnny.
What you mean you're not ready?
They've been separated, and Marquita was not ready to go there yet.
But Johnny didn't want to take no for an answer.
I'm just
Let me
not.
say something.
What?
I can have my wife anytime I want.
Johnny threw her onto the bed.
Get off of me!
He was pushing up on her and trying to have sexual intercourse, and she didn't want it.
Get off! Get off of me, Johnny!
He pulled her arms so much that he pulled her shoulder out of the socket.
When Marquita saw a chance to escape, she took it.
Marquita says she tried to flee from Johnny. She got away from him and got a taser, but she said that the stun gun didn't slow him down. It actually made him angrier.
I can't believe you did that.
He actually grabbed a lit candle and hit Marquita in the face with it. It left a burn next to her ear.
Afraid for her life, Marquita did the only thing she could think to do.
Johnny kept a knife on the bedside table for protection, and she grabbed it.
She stabbed her husband.
Get back over here.
How many times?
I don't know. It's a blur. It was a blur.
While Johnny lay bleeding on the floor of the couple's townhouse, Marquita panicked and started to hide what she'd done.
She was so upset and unclear about what to do because she didn't want anyone to separate her from her son.
That's why she started trying to clean up the crime scene.
To the detectives, Marquita's story sounds plausible.
Her shoulder was dislocated, or shows that, hey, it probably was a physical altercation.
She also had a burn from the candle behind her ear.
And Marquita says there's more evidence to support her version of events.
As a show of good faith, she agrees to tell police where she disposed of the murder weapon. She says that she threw it into a dumpster behind a local strip mall.
Since Marquita's claim of self-defense seems to check out, police let her go for the time being while they verified her account.
The first thing detectives do is track down the dumpster.
At that location, police find in the dumpster a blood-soaked pillow and the taser that Marquita says she used against Johnny.
Back at the station, investigators follow up with Marquita's family, and they also describe Johnny as an abuser.
They had seen Marquita with a busted lip and a black eye. They knew Johnny did it, but she was always trying to cover for him, which isn't uncommon in victims of domestic abuse.
There is going to be a lot of things where you're not going to want them to get in trouble, or, I love them so much, and, this would just tarnish their image.
Everything the family has to say seemed to support Marquita's story.
She was a battered woman, and she was fighting for her life.
But when detectives meet with Johnny's family, who've just arrived in town from Florida, a different picture of the couple's relationship starts to come into focus.
When police talk to Johnny's family, they get a very different story. His family states that the abuse was actually coming from Marquita. "30-year-old Marquita Sutton has admitted to stabbing her husband Johnny to death. But she says she only did it to save herself. She was so afraid for her life that she stabs him.
She had injuries that was consistent with physical abuse, and multiple people had claimed that Johnny was violent towards her.
When detectives sit down with Johnny's family, they hear a different side of the story.
His family states that the abuse was actually coming from Marquita, that she was the one that was very violent in the relationship.
They saw the fights with their own eyes, and they said that Marquita was the aggressor every time.
They had overheard conversations with Marquita yelling and screaming in the background, and it was her that was more violent towards him.
As for Johnny's arrest, his family places the blame for that on Marquita, too.
And in reference to the story that the neighbor told about the police being called to their apartment, Johnny was actually trying to leave the home, and Marquita was blocking him. And he attempted several times to move her out of the doorway so that he could leave the home.
Based on what Johnny's family is saying, it sounds like he was a classic victim of domestic violence.
Many of us grew up with don't put your hands on a woman under any circumstances. And unfortunately, it might not be reciprocated.
They would get into outbursts and arguments in different places. But as much as they would argue, they would go right back into the relationship. They would go right back into that really passionate draw to each other.
But Johnny's loved ones say, at some point, he'd had enough.
He eventually realized that Marquita wasn't going to change. And that's when he asked her to move out.
I need you to move out.
Are you serious right now?
It wasn't long before she was worming her way back into his life.
The family believed that Marquita saw Johnny as her meal ticket. She wanted someone to provide for her, to take care of her. And she was not about to let that person get away.
And the family now believes that it was Johnny's affair that drove Marquita over the edge.
Gloria Moss was the wrench in her plan, If Johnny left her, that meant no more military salary, no more easy living.
It was, I don't want to lose this person. This is mine, and it would always be mine.
For police, it's impossible to know who's telling the truth.
One side, they hear that Johnny was aggressive and abusive, and on the other side, they hear that it was Marquita. Police are unsure about who was the aggressor in this relationship.
To expose the truth, they look to the evidence.
In light of what they were hearing from Johnny's family, Marquita's attempts to clean up the crime scene were starting to look a little bit more suspicious.
If you don't have a guilty conscience, you'll definitely call the police and explain what happened before even thinking about, hey, I need to wrap the body up. I need to hide this. I need to throw this stuff away.
The fact that she had put enough thought into this to go out and buy a hacksaw, that she was even thinking about cutting up her husband's body, that's disturbing.
It shows that you have intent to hide something that you have done and you know that wasn't right.
Reviewing evidence from the dumpster turns up even more signs of Marquita's guilt.
While collecting evidence from the dumpster, they had recovered a receipt.
Buying a taser 2 days before the murder, it shows an intent to do harm to someone.
The couple's phone records reveal yet another suspicious find.
The police determined that the text messages that Johnny's commanding officer received from him were sent after he was dead, presumably by Marquita.
Pretending to be him after he's dead is really something that, in my mind, spells out a bit more intent. I know what I'm doing is wrong.
It all seems to undercut Marquita's claims of self-defense.
It really makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up.
I need you to move out.
It screams more murder than self-defense.
And while abuse could have motivated this crime, police also see another possibility.
Johnny having the affair with the young lady at work, and Marquita finding out added another layer.
She may think he's going to be leaving me soon, and I'm not having it. And this is what my excuse is going to be.
But it's all speculation until the autopsy report comes in.
It was absolutely horrific what they found.
He was stabbed 121 times.
It is not self-defense. It was murder.
Marquita Sutton has revealed to homicide detectives that she killed her husband Johnny in self-defense.
She gave her recollection of what happened. She claims Mr. Sutton was pushing up on her and trying to have sexual intercourse, and she didn't want it. He became very physical, and then she decides to tase him.
Johnny just kept getting angrier, and he kept coming for Marquita, and that's when she decided to grab a knife.
But the autopsy report tells a different story.
There are over 100 stab wounds in his body, 121 to be exact. And he has stab wounds in his face, chest, all over his body.
120 times is really, really gruesome.
For the investigators, it's proof that Marquita wasn't just trying to protect herself.
Police can understand in the situation that Marquita shows, maybe someone being stabbed once, twice, maybe even 3 times, but this is kind of giving them a red flag.
Think about that, how much force and pressure you have to continuously stab somebody 121 times, not just in the same place, but all over his body.
It definitely does not seem like something that was just out of nowhere. There was understanding behind, this is what is going to happen if I do this.
She had the intent to kill him.
The same day detectives received the report, Marquita is arrested and charged with murder.
She refuses to talk to the police, but they don't need her confession to piece together what happened on the night Johnny was killed.
They believe that when Marquita learned of Johnny's affair, she was overcome with rage.
So not only was she losing her husband, but she was also losing her meal ticket.
It's over.
What do you mean that it's over? What?
I'm gonna go be with Gloria.
You cannot do this to me.
I need you to move out.
Are you serious right now?
Yeah.
She said, I'm not letting go, so something's gonna have to give at the end of the day.
No, I'm not going anywhere, Johnny, and you're not going anywhere.
The simmering tensions came to a head.
That intense love and passion that they have for each other turns to intense arguments.
What do you think you are doing?
But then, something in Marquita snapped.
She decided that if she couldn't have him, no one could.
Their part was a fight, and it turns into a more physical argument.
If she sustained any injuries, it was probably from Johnny trying to defend himself. She gets away from him and gets to a taser.
She was able to stun him.
And with Johnny incapacitated, Marquita reached for another weapon.
That's when she pulled out the knife.
She stabbed her husband 121 times.
In order to stab someone 121 times, you have to be really angry at that person. This was built up aggression that basically got released.
Once her husband was dead, Marquita immediately got to work disposing of the evidence.
Miss Sutton definitely went through a lot of trouble trying to cover up the incident.
Meanwhile, she concocted a story that could get her off the hook for the crime.
She had time to think about what she needs to say to the investigators and what's going to fit her narrative.
Thankfully, the detectives are able to see through Marquita's lies.
With investigators, in any case, you're going to sit down and you're going to match up the facts with the story. The truth will start to come out.
To continue and to attempt to dismember him indicates a level of anger, rage, and repressed hatred that she was carrying for quite a long time.
For Johnny's family, the senseless nature of the crime is almost too much to bear.
They were prepared to lose him if it was in the service of his country, but they weren't prepared for this.
But they'll never get the chance to see Johnny's killer stand trial.
Some aspects of the case gave the prosecutors a pause about presenting it in front of a jury.
Ultimately, both sides agree to strike a deal.
In September of 2015, she agrees to a plea of second-degree murder.
At her sentencing hearing, a sympathetic judge takes mercy on Marquita.
Marquita is given a 30-year sentence for the second-degree murder. However, the trial judge decides to waive all but 10 of those years.
This judge believed that she was abused. It was a mercy sentence.
Today, Marquita is once again a free woman.
In Maryland, when you get your sentence, you in state prison serve somewhere around 50% of that time. So she was out prior to 10 years.
It's a fact that doesn't sit well with Johnny's friends and family.
See somebody go to jail for less than 10 years for murder is something that certainly could get a lot of emotions going.
The family of Johnny Sutton III doesn't feel that they have seen justice for the loss of their loved one.
And while Marquita is allowed to live the rest of her life unshackled, Johnny will never get the chance to see what the future held in store for him.
He had so much to live for. A promising career, a woman he loved, and most importantly, his one-year-old son.
The year was 1986, an era defined by neon glows, the rhythmic hiss of cassette tapes, and a sense of suburban invincibility that would, on one cool October night, be shattered forever. In the small, tightly knit community of Blackwood, the air was thick with the scent of burning maple leaves and the looming excitement of the annual Harvest Ball. It was a town where everyone knew your name, your business, and the color of your front door. A place where the shadows were supposed to be thin and the monsters were only found in the flickering light of the drive-in cinema. Elena Thorne was 19 years old, a girl with eyes like a summer storm and a laugh that seemed to echo through the corridors of Blackwood High long after she had graduated. She was a dancer, a dreamer, a girl who saw the world not as it was, but as a stage waiting for her to take the lead. On the night of October 24th, Elena stepped out of the gymnasium doors, the muffled thud of a pop song fading behind her, and walked into the crisp autumn darkness. She was wearing a sequined dress that caught the moonlight, a shimmering figure moving toward the parking lot, and then, in the space between two heartbeats, she simply ceased to exist. No scream was heard over the wind. No tires screeched against the asphalt. The silence that followed was not just an absence of sound. It was a physical weight that settled over the town, a cold case in the making before the clock had even struck midnight. The first few hours were characterized by a frantic, disorganized hope. Her father, Silas Thorne, a man whose hands were calloused from years at the local mill, stood on the porch with a flashlight that cut weak, yellow holes into the fog. He called her name until his voice was a ragged rasp, his eyes searching the treeline for a flash of sequins or the golden bounce of her hair. Martha, her mother, sat at the kitchen table, her fingers white-knuckled around a cold cup of coffee, staring at the rotary phone as if she could force it to ring by the sheer power of her desperation. There were no cell phones to track, no GPS pings to follow, only the terrifying vastness of a night that had swallowed their daughter whole. By dawn, the hope had begun to curdle into a sickening dread. The local sheriff, a man named Miller who had never dealt with anything more serious than a stolen tractor, found Elena's car exactly where she had left it. The keys were still in the ignition. Her purse was on the passenger seat. A single, crushed carnation from her corsage lay on the floor mat, a tiny, bruised symbol of a night that had gone horribly wrong. There were no fingerprints that didn't belong to her, no signs of a struggle, nothing to indicate that she hadn't just evaporated into the morning mist. As the sun rose over Blackwood, the town didn't wake up. It stood still. The news of the missing Thorne girl spread through the diners and the hardware stores like a contagion. This was the birth of a mystery that would define a generation, a vanishing act that defied logic. The woods surrounding the school were flooded with volunteers, hundreds of men and women shoulder to shoulder, moving through the underbrush with sticks, their faces grim masks of communal fear. They searched the ravines, the old abandoned mines, the stagnant ponds that sat like black eyes in the forest floor. They found nothing. No scrap of fabric, no shoe, no clue that Elena had ever walked those paths. It was as if the earth itself had opened up and pulled her down into the dark, leaving the people of Blackwood to stare at the empty spaces she once occupied. The police brought in dogs, their frantic barking echoing through the pines, but even the hounds lost the scent at the edge of the asphalt. Elena Thorne was gone, and in her place a hollow, aching silence began to grow, a silence that would last for 40 years. In the weeks that followed, the investigation became a grueling exercise in futility. Every local boy who had ever looked at Elena was interrogated in the stark, fluorescent light of the station. Every traveler who had passed through the county was tracked down. The detectives looked for a monster, a drifter, a shadow passing through their perfect town. They never looked at the foundations of the houses themselves. They never looked at the people who were crying the loudest. The case was a puzzle with missing pieces, a narrative that stopped mid-sentence. Silas Thorne became a ghost of a man, walking the streets at night, looking into the windows of parked cars, his mind unspooling in the face of the inexplicable. Martha stopped speaking entirely, her grief turning into a silent, internal fire that slowly consumed her from the inside out. The Thorne household, once a place of music and laughter, became a mausoleum of frozen time. Elena's room kept exactly as it was on that October night, a shrine to a girl who is neither dead nor alive in the eyes of the law. The Blackwood vanishing became local lore, a story whispered to children to keep them from wandering too far into the woods after dark. It was a cold case before the term was even popular, a leaden weight that the community learned to carry. But as the years turned into decades, the intensity of the search faded into a dull, rhythmic throb. People moved away, the sheriff retired, and the school where Elena had last been seen was torn down and replaced by a shopping center. Yet, the mystery remained, a jagged piece of the past that refused to be smoothed over by time. There were rumors, of course, sightings in distant cities, theories about secret lives and hidden escapes, in Hung Sao Tam Trong Tam Tom, but deep down, everyone knew that Elena Thorne hadn't left Blackwood. She was still there, somewhere in the silence, waiting for the truth to be dragged out of the shadows. The community had moved on, but the family hadn't. They were trapped in 1986, bound by a secret that was so dark, so deep, that not even they dared to acknowledge its existence. The tragedy of the Thorne family wasn't just the loss of a daughter, it was the slow, agonizing erosion of their humanity. Without an ending, there could be no mourning. Without a body, there could be no peace. They lived in a state of permanent Mat Tich Bien, mysterious disappearance, a limbo that turned their home into a fortress of secrets. Neighbors noticed the way Silas stopped mowing the lawn, the way the curtains were always drawn, the way the brother, Elias, only 12 when his sister vanished, grew up to be a man of few words and cold, distant eyes. He was the one who stayed, the one who took care of the aging parents, the one who inherited the silence. The town looked at them with pity, never realizing that the pity was a cloak that hid the most shocking betrayal in Blackwood's history. The 40-year cold case wasn't just about a girl who went missing. It was about the lies that were told to keep a family from falling apart, lies that would eventually lead to a shock arrest that would rock the foundations of the state. As we stand on the threshold of 2026, the technology of the future is finally catching up to the crimes of the past. The dust on the evidence files is being disturbed by a new generation of investigators who don't remember the Harvest Ball, who don't know the Thorne family, and who aren't afraid of the shadows in the woods. They see the cold case not as a tragedy, but as a problem to be solved with DNA and digital reconstruction. They're looking at the old photos, the grainy Polaroids of the search parties, and they're seeing things that the original detectives missed. Man law KY law, strange clues hidden in the background, inconsistencies in the statements that had been accepted as gospel for 40 years. The net is beginning to tighten, not around a drifter or a ghost, but around the heart of the Thorne family itself. The darkest secret is about to be exhumed, and as we go deeper into the night that changed everything, we must prepare ourselves for a revelation that is as chilling as it is inevitable. The music stopped in 1986, but the final note is finally about to be played, and the sound will be deafening. The atmosphere in Blackwood is changing again. There is a tension in the air, a feeling of an impending storm. The old-timers sit on their porches and watch the unmarked police cars cruise slowly past the Thorne estate. They talk in hushed tones about the new evidence, about the boxes being carried out of the station in the middle of the night. They remember Elena, the girl in the sequin dress, and they wonder if they're finally going to see her face again. But this time, it won't be on a missing person poster. It will be in a courtroom. The 40-year cold case is about to be solved, and the family's darkest secret is no longer a whisper in the dark. It is a scream that is about to break the silence of 4 decades. The shock arrest is coming, and when it does, the town of Blackwood will never be the same. The night the music died was only the beginning. The real horror is what happened in the silence that followed, a horror that has been hidden in plain sight, protected by the very people who claimed to be searching for the truth. Stay with us as we peel back the layers of this 40-year-old nightmare, moving from the neon lights of the 80s into the cold, clinical reality of the present. We're going back to the gym, back to the parking lot, and into the very heart of the Thorne household. We're going to find out what really happened to Elena and why it took 40 years for the truth to surface. This is not just a story of a disappearance. It is a story of a family's collapse, a town's betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of justice that refuses to let the past stay buried. The sequins have long since faded. The carnation has turned to dust, but the blood still speaks, and it is calling out from the earth of Blackwood, demanding to be heard. The family's darkest secret is about to be the headline of the century, and the world is finally ready to listen. The cold case lockers of the Blackwood Police Department are not just metal boxes. They are tombs of static energy, pressurized vaults holding the echoes of 1,000 unanswered screams. For 40 years, Box 86 to 1024 sat on a reinforced shelf, its cardboard lid bowing under the weight of 4 decades of dust, a silent witness to the night Elena Thorne became a ghost. Inside that box lay the fragments of a shattered life, a single, crushed carnation, a set of keys with a class of 85 keychain, and a grainy cassette tape of the music playing in the gymnasium the moment she disappeared. To the original detectives, these were dead ends, relics of a failure that haunted their retirements. But to the forensic scientists of 2026, these are not just objects, they are data points, biological maps waiting to be read by machines that didn't exist when the Reagan era was in full swing. We are moving back to that parking lot now, back to the asphalt of Blackwood High, feeling the damp, heavy fog that rolled off the hills that night, a fog that acted as a perfect, natural shroud for a predator. The investigation didn't just stall in 1986, it froze, paralyzed by a lack of physical evidence and a surplus of local rumors that led everywhere and nowhere. Every neighbor had a theory, every teenager had a secret, and every dark corner of the woods was searched until the soles of the searchers' boots wore through. But the one place the police never looked with enough intensity was the place that should have been the most obvious, the very heart of the Thorne household, where the silence was so loud it should have been a siren. The community of Blackwood in the mid-'80s was a portrait of American stability, a place where stranger danger was a headline in a distant city, not a reality in your own backyard. When Elena vanished, that stability didn't just tilt, it inverted. The local diner, once filled with the clatter of breakfast plates and friendly gossip, became a command center for paranoia. Parents stopped letting their children walk to school. The woods, once a playground for hikers and hunters, were reimagined as a dark, sentient maze where a monster waited in the shadows. The police were overwhelmed, their 1980s technology limited to blood typing and rudimentary fingerprinting, tools that were useless against a killer who left no blood and wore gloves. They looked for the outsider, the drifter passing through on the interstate, the man with the tinted windows and the out-of-state plates. They interviewed every transient in a 3-county radius, checked every motel registry, and chased every strange car sighting reported by a terrified public. They were looking for a wolf in the woods, never realizing that the wolf might be sitting at a kitchen table, helping with the dishes, and praying for the search to end. The mysterious disappearance was treated as a kidnapping by a phantom, a narrative that allowed the town to maintain its illusion of internal innocence while directing its fear outward at a world they didn't understand. Inside the Thorne home, the atmosphere was one of surgical precision. Silas Thorne, the stoic patriarch, didn't just grieve, he managed the tragedy. He was the one who spoke to the press, his face a mask of iron-willed determination, his voice never cracking as he pleaded for Elena's return. He became a local hero of sorts, a symbol of the strong, silent father who would stop at nothing to find his daughter. But behind the closed doors of their suburban colonial, the reality was a suffocating pressure cooker of unspoken rules. Martha Thorne didn't just stop talking. She became a ghost in her own hallways, her movements dictated by a schedule of grief that left no room for questions. And then there was Elias, the younger brother, a 12-year-old boy who watched his world collapse in a single night. He was the one who saw the things the police missed. He saw the way his father spent hours in the garage after the search parties went home. He saw the way his mother looked at the basement door with a terror that surpassed the loss of a child. He was the silent witness to a family's darkest secret, a secret that was being buried deeper with every passing year, hidden under layers of respectable misery and public sympathy. The strange clues were there, not in the woods, but in the shifts of body language, the sudden changes in conversation, and the way the family stopped looking each other in the eye the moment the front door was locked. 40 years later, the shocking community headline is no longer a memory, it is a live broadcast. The Cold Case Unit of 2026 is using deep tissue DNA extraction on that crushed carnation, a technique that can pull a genetic signature from a single, microscopic skin cell trapped in the dried petals for 4 decades. The lab is a cathedral of white light and humming servers, a place where the past is being exhumed with molecular accuracy. As the digital sequence begins to form on the monitors, it doesn't match the National Criminal Database. It doesn't match any known drifters or serial killers from the 80s. It matches something far more devastating. It matches the Thorne family tree. This is the moment the family's darkest secret begins to bleed into the public record. The detectives are not looking at a stranger anymore. They're looking at a bloodline. They're looking at the possibility that the monster didn't come from the interstate, but from the master bedroom. The shock arrest isn't just a legal procedure, it is a tectonic shift that threatens to destroy the very identity of Blackwood. How could a family maintain a lie this large for 40 years? How could a father, a mother, and a son live in the same house, sharing meals and holidays, while a body, or the truth of one, was hidden just beneath their feet? The 1986 case files are being reopened with a surgical focus on the first 48 hours, the window of time where the original detectives were most easily manipulated. They are revisiting the statements of Silas Thorne, looking for the linguistic markers of deception that were invisible to the local sheriff back then. They're seeing the way Silas directed the search parties away from a specific sector of the old mill property, a sector he claimed to have searched himself. They're looking at the mechanics of the Harvest Ball parking lot again, realizing that the strange car everyone reported might have been a distraction, a phantom created to draw the eye away from the vehicle that never left the driveway. The cold case is heating up with a terrifying intensity, turning the mysterious disappearance into a meticulously planned domestic execution. The sequins of Elena's dress, once thought to be a sign of her beauty and life, are now imagined as a trail of evidence that someone worked very hard to erase. Every detail that was once a source of sympathy for the Thorne family is now being reevaluated as a piece of a 40-year-old cover-up. The town of Blackwood is holding its breath, the air thick with the realization that their communal grief was a stage for someone else's performance. The psychological toll of this revelation is a secondary disaster. The people who grew up with Elena, the friends who danced with her at the ball, the boy who was supposed to take her home, they are all being pulled back into the nightmare. They are remembering the strange clues they dismissed as teenage nerves, the way Elena seemed afraid of going home that week, the way she had whispered about a fight with her father that had left her shaking. These were not the stories the police wanted to hear in 1986. They wanted a monster in the woods, not a monster in the house. The cold case stayed cold because the heat was too close to home. The stagnation of the investigation wasn't a failure of effort. It was a failure of imagination. No one wanted to believe that the perfect Thorne family was a hollow shell. No one wanted to believe that the father who led the vigils was the same man who had extinguished the light in his daughter's eyes. But as the DNA results are verified and the digital reconstruction of the night's timeline is completed, the shocking community is forced to face the reality that the truth has been living next door to them for 4 decades, drinking coffee at the same diner and praying in the same pews. As the detectives of 2026 prepare the warrant for the shock arrest, they are moving with a quiet, lethal efficiency. They are not just arresting a man, they are dismantling a legend. They are going back to the Thorne estate, which has become a crumbling monument to a forgotten era. The paint is peeling, the garden is overgrown with weeds that look like skeletal fingers reaching out of the earth, and the windows are dark, unblinking eyes watching the street. Inside, Silas Thorne is now an old man, his hands still calloused, his eyes still hard, but the iron mask is beginning to rust. He knows the DNA trap is closing. He knows that the science of the future has no mercy for the secrets of the past. The 40-year cold case is finally reaching its boiling point, and the family's darkest secret is about to be dragged into the sunlight. The sequins are long gone. The music has faded into static, but the earth of Blackwood is about to give up its dead, and the sound of the shovel hitting the truth will be a shock that will vibrate through the heart of the town forever. The investigation is now moving into the basement phase, a literal and metaphorical descent into the foundations of the Thorne life. The search warrant covers not just the house, but every inch of the property Silas Thorne defended for 40 years. They're bringing in ground-penetrating radar, looking for the strange clues that are buried under the concrete floor of the garage or tucked into the crawl space behind the furnace. The tension in the air is palpable, a dawn dap, urgent, pressure that makes every heartbeat feel like a countdown. The townspeople gather at the edge of the property, their faces illuminated by the blue and red lights of the squad cars, a modern-day vigil for a truth they are terrified to hear. This is the shock community in its rawest form. The moment when the past and the present collide in a violent, unavoidable explosion of reality. Elena Thorne isn't a ghost anymore. She is a piece of evidence, and the man who took her is finally running out of places to hide in the silence. What's cortisol? Or be fence other fuzz. The shadows of Blackwood are no longer empty. They are crowded with the memories of a girl who never got to grow up and the man who ensured she wouldn't. The family's darkest secret is a weight that is finally being lifted from the soul of the town, but the cost of the reveal is a devastation that will take another 40 years to heal. The sequins are found. The carnation is identified. The killer is unmasked. And as the handcuffs click shut in the quiet of the Thorne hallway, the shock arrest marks the end of a mystery and the beginning of a reckoning that will rewrite the history of Blackwood in blood and bone. The 40-year cold case is over, but the haunting of Serenity Lane, the real Serenity Lane, hidden behind the Thorne facade, is a story that will never be forgotten. The truth is here. The nightmare is real. And the music is finally, terrifyingly loud. The tires of the black SUVs crunch over the gravel of the Thorne driveway with the weight of a 40-year-old judgment, a sound that signals the end of a meticulously maintained silence. We are no longer observing from a distance. We are breaching the perimeter of the lie, moving into the space where the family's darkest secret has been calcified by 4 decades of cold, calculated avoidance. The air around the estate is stagnant, trapped in a bubble of 1986, where the peeling white paint of the colonial house looks like dead skin sloughing off a long-hidden corpse. As the forensic teams step out into the biting morning air, they aren't just carrying evidence bags and cameras. They are carrying the genetic sniper, the digital certainty that has turned the Thorne family tree into a cage of their own making. This is the moment where the cold case begins to thaw with a violent, uncontrollable heat, turning the quiet suburban morning into a site of a shock arrest that will rewrite every history book in Blackwood. Detective Sarah Jenkins, a woman whose own father had searched these woods in '86, leads the way, her eyes fixed on the front door, a door that has been a barrier to the truth for a lifetime. The community is already gathering at the edges of the yellow tape, their breath visible in the chilly air, their faces a mixture of morbid curiosity and a deep, ancestral fear that the perfect neighbors were never neighbors at all, but jailers of a secret too terrible to name. The interior of the Thorne house is a museum of stagnation, a place where time didn't just stop, it was smothered. The scent hit the investigators immediately, a mixture of lemon furniture polish, old paper, and a faint, underlying dampness that felt like the breath of an old cellar. Every surface is dusted to a surgical sheen, a testament to Martha Thorne's decades-long obsession with order, an order that was meant to camouflage the chaos beneath the floorboards. The detectives move through the living room, where the floral-patterned sofa from 1986 sits like a floral sarcophagus, and into the kitchen, the heart of the mysterious disappearance narrative. This was where the press conferences were held. This was where the strong, silent father Silas Thorne sat and described his daughter's last meal. But as the technicians begin to deploy the ground-penetrating radar, the rhythmic ping-ping-ping of the machine starts to peel back the layers of the Thorne reality. They aren't looking for jewelry or lost toys. They're looking for anomalies in the density of the earth beneath the house, searching for the strange clues that the 1986 investigators, hampered by their own empathy for the grieving family, refused to see. The radar screen flickers, a green and black topographic map of the hidden, and suddenly, the rhythm changes. A void, an irregularity, a shape that shouldn't be there, buried 5 feet below the foundation of the master bedroom. The psychological tension in the room is a physical force, a dawn dap, urgent pressure that makes the very walls seem to pulse with the weight of the past. Elias Thorne, now 52 years old, stands in the corner of the kitchen, his hands trembling as he watches the forensic team dismantle the world he grew up in. He is the bridge between the 1986 nightmare and the 2026 reckoning, the 12-year-old boy who never left the house, the son who stayed to witness the slow decay of his parents' souls. His eyes are fixed on his father, Silas, who sits in his usual chair, his face an impenetrable mask of weathered stone. The old man doesn't move as the detectives start to mark the floor with orange spray paint, designating the dig sites. He doesn't protest when they bring in the jackhammers. He only stares ahead, his eyes too dark, bottomless pits that seem to absorb the blue and red flashes of the police lights outside. The shock arrest hasn't happened yet, but the shackles are already there, forged from the DNA recovered from a crushed carnation and the strange clues of a family's refusal to mourn. The silence of the house is about to be shattered by the sound of concrete breaking, a sound that will finally drown out the music of the 1986 Harvest Ball. The first strike of the jackhammer vibrates through the foundation, a seismic shock that ripples through the neighborhood. Outside, the shocked community gasps as the dust begins to rise from the Thorne windows, a white powder that looks like powdered bone. People who haven't spoken to each other in years are huddled together on the sidewalk, whispering the name, Elena, like a prayer. They remember the sequin dress. They remember the storm cloud eyes. And they remember the way Silas Thorne used to stand in his yard, staring at anyone who lingered too long, a guardian of the silence. Inside, the technicians are sifting through the first layers of debris. They find things that were supposed to stay buried, a rusted metal box from the 1970s, a child's shoe, and then something that brings the entire operation to a grinding halt. Tucked behind a false wall in the basement, hidden behind a stack of old magazines from October 1986, they find a diary. Not Elena's, Martha's. The handwriting is frantic, a jagged script that looks like a scream captured in ink. The music won't stop. The first entry reads, "Silas says the earth will hold it, but the sequins keep shining in the dark. He tells me to be still. He tells me the silence is our only daughter now." The discovery of the diary is the Manwa KY law, strange clue, that turns the investigation from a recovery mission into a criminal autopsy. It reveals the anatomy of a cover-up that was as meticulously planned as a military operation. Martha Thorne didn't stop talking because of grief. She was silenced by a darkest secret that was shared between her and her husband, a secret that turned their marriage into a suicide pact of the spirit. The diary speaks of the night of the sequins, of a fight that began over a dance and ended in a parking lot that never should have been empty. It describes the way Silas came home with his knuckles split and his eyes wide with a terrifying, holy clarity. He didn't ask for help. He demanded obedience. The mysterious disappearance was a fiction written in blood and maintained through the sheer, brute force of Silas's will. The community's pity was his shield. The town's vigils were his camouflage. Every candle lit for Elena was a mocking tribute to the man who had buried the light herself. As the forensic team moves deeper into the crawl space beneath the master bedroom, the ground-penetrating radar begins to scream. The void they detected earlier is no longer a mystery, it is a destination. They find a trapdoor, hidden under a layer of original 1980s linoleum, a door that hasn't been opened in 40 years. The hinges groan, a sound of rusted agony, and as the light of the high-powered torches spills into the dark, the 40-year cold case finally reaches its destination. The air that rushes out is cold, ancient, and carries the unmistakable metallic tang of the past. This was Elena's final stage. This was the theater where the harvest ball ended and the family's darkest secret began. The detectives see the glitter first, a single, silver sequin catching the light, reflecting 40 years of hidden history. And then they see the rest. The sequins aren't alone. They are scattered over a shape that has become one with the earth, a shimmering shroud that has protected the truth from the decay of the decades. The shock arrest is no longer a possibility. It is an inevitability that is unfolding in real time. Detective Jenkins turns to Silas Thorne, her voice a calm, lethal edge in the dusty air of the kitchen. She doesn't need a confession. She has the DNA from the carnation, she has Martha's diary, and she has the strange clues that are currently being photographed in the basement. She reads him his rights as the handcuffs click shut, the sound echoing through the house like a final, closing note of a song. This strong, silent father doesn't flinch. He doesn't look at his son, Elias, who has collapsed into a chair, sobbing with the relief of a man who has finally been allowed to wake up from a 40-year nightmare. Silas only looks at the basement door, his expression one of profound, arrogant satisfaction. He had kept the secret for 40 years. He had beaten the town, he had beaten the police, and he had almost beaten time itself. He was the master of the cold case, the director of the mysterious disappearance, and in his twisted mind, he was still the hero of the story. Outside, the reaction of the shocked community is a tidal wave of fury and grief. As Silas is led out of the house, his head held high, a roar of collective outrage breaks the silence of Blackwood. People are screaming Elena's name, throwing their old missing person posters at the squad car, their faces twisted by the realization of 40 years of betrayal. They were his neighbors. They were his friends. They had brought him casseroles and comforted him during the dark nights. And all the while, he was walking over the grave of the girl they were all looking for. The 40-year cold case solved headline is flashing on every phone, every screen, a digital scar that will never fade. The town is no longer a place of safety. It is a place where the darkest secret lived next door and was invited to the party. The betrayal is total, reaching into the very soul of the community, turning their history into a lie and their memories into a haunting. Inside the house, the work continues. They are recovering Elena now, moving with a reverence that she was denied in 1986. The sequin dress is still there, the silver threads tarnished by the earth, but still reflecting the light of a world that refused to forget her. Every sequin is a witness. Every bone is a testimony. The mysterious disappearance is over, replaced by the clinical reality of a shock arrest and a murder trial that will be the most sensational in the state's history. But the echo of the night, the music died, still lingers in the hallways. It's in the way the wind whistles through the broken floorboards, in the way the dust settles on the floral sofa, and in the way Elias Thorne looks at the empty space where his sister used to be. The 40-year cold case is solved, but the horror is just beginning to be understood. A horror that proves that the most dangerous secrets are not the ones hidden in the woods, but the ones that are kept in the house with a white picket fence. As the sun begins to set on the Thorne estate, casting long, skeletal shadows across the driveway, the forensic teams begin to pack up their gear. The house is a shell, a hollowed-out monument to a lie that finally collapsed under its own weight. The 40-year cold case is a headline, a story for the news, a sequence of data in a database. But for the people of Blackwood, it is a permanent change in the atmosphere. They look at their own homes differently now. They check the foundations. They listen to the silence in their own kitchens. They wonder what else is buried beneath the surface of their perfect lives. The shock community is beginning the long process of mourning a girl they never truly knew and a neighbor they never truly understood. The 40-year cold case is over, but the haunting of Serenity Lane, the real Serenity Lane, the one hidden in the dark, is a story that will never, ever be finished. The truth is here, and it is a cold, sequined thing that will never let them sleep again. The yellow crime scene tape doesn't just mark a boundary on Serenity Lane. It serves as a jagged scar across the collective memory of a town that spent 40 years worshipping a lie. We are moving deeper into the shadows now, past the flashing lights of the patrol cars and into the excavated heart of the Thorne residence, where the air is no longer just cold, it is heavy with the weight of a molecular reckoning. The shock arrest of Silas Thorne has sent a seismic wave through Blackwood, but the true epicenter of the horror lies beneath the master bedroom, in a space that the original 1986 investigators walked over 1,000 times without ever suspecting the ground was hollow. The genetic sniper technology didn't just identify the blood on a carnation, it unlocked the geography of a secret that was designed to outlast the people who kept it. Forensic anthropologists are now on their hands and knees in the crawl space, their brushes moving with a rhythmic, dawn-dap, urgent precision, peeling back the layers of earth that have acted as a silent accomplice to a 40-year-old murder. Every inch of soil removed is a sentence in a story that Silas Thorne thought he had burned. The glitter of a single silver sequin in the dirt isn't just a man-wa-ky law, strange clue. It is the first word of a testimony from the grave, a shimmering fragment of Elena Thorne's final night that refused to turn to dust. The family's darkest secret wasn't just the act of killing, it was the 40 years of maintenance that followed. The way the lawn was kept, the way the house was painted, the way the community was manipulated into providing a shield of pity. As the forensic lights illuminate the vault, we see the terrifying craftsmanship of Silas Thorne. This wasn't a shallow grave dug in a panic. It was a reinforced chamber, a suburban sepulchre lined with plastic and sealed with a layer of industrial concrete that had been hidden under the original floorboards. The engineering of the space suggests a chilling level of premeditation, or perhaps a post-murder clarity that is even more disturbing. Silas Thorne didn't just want to hide his daughter. He wanted to contain her, to keep her frozen in the moment of her disappearance so that the mysterious disappearance narrative could remain flawless. The shock community is now realizing that their strong, silent father was actually a warden, presiding over a private prison of bone and silver threads. The trust that once defined Serenity Lane has been replaced by a visceral, skin-crawling nausea as neighbors look at their own foundations and wonder what secrets are holding up their own lives. The diary found in the basement, Martha Thorne's ledger of guilt, is being analyzed in a high-security lab, each page a window into a household where the music of 1986 never stopped playing. The entries describe a marriage that became a hostage situation, with Silas using the darkest secret to bind Martha to him in a permanent, suffocating embrace. He watches the floor, she wrote in 1994. He stands over the spot in the bedroom and listens for her. He says the sequins are talking to him, telling him he did the right thing to keep the family together. But I can hear the ball starting again every time the wind blows. This is the psychological blueprint of the 40-year cold case, a revelation that the Thorne household was a theater of the macabre where every meal and every holiday was a performance for an audience of one. The girl beneath the floor. The man-wa-ky law. Strange clues are no longer just physical. They are the behavioral echoes of a woman who spent half her life erasing her own daughter's existence to satisfy the ego of a man who viewed his family as his own personal property. Inside the vault, the recovery team has reached the primary remains. The image is one that will haunt the detectives of 2026 for the rest of their lives. Elena Thorne is there, draped in the sequined shroud that has become the haunting icon of this case. The silver dress, once a symbol of her youth and her dreams at the Harvest Ball, has maintained its luster in the oxygen-deprived environment of the sealed chamber. It reflects the harsh beams of the forensic torches, casting a spectral, dancing light against the earthen walls, as if the dance Elena started in 1986 is finally being completed. The shock community hears the rumors through the police scanners. The girl in the silver dress has been found. The cold case is no longer a folder in a cabinet. It is a physical reality that demands a reckoning. The sequins aren't just fabric. They are witnesses to the final struggle, to the family's darkest secret that ended in a parking lot and was buried in a bedroom. The 1986 investigators were looking for a monster in the woods, but the monster was the one who helped them draw the maps, the one who redirected their gaze every time it lingered too long on the Thorne driveway. The investigation is now turning toward the 1986 failure analysis, a brutal look at how the original detectives were blinded by their own societal biases. Silas Thorne was a respected man, a pillar of the community, a grieving father whose pain was so intense it was considered sacred. No one wanted to be the officer who accused him of the unthinkable. No one wanted to break the perfect image of the Thorne family. This was the invisible wall that protected Silas for 40 years. The strange clues, the sudden renovation of the master bedroom 2 weeks after the disappearance, the way the Thorne dog wouldn't stop barking at the floor, the way Martha Thorne's eyes seemed to go dead overnight, were all dismissed as the eccentricities of grief. But in 2026, the genetic sniper doesn't have emotions. It doesn't have respect for pillars of the community. It only recognizes the 1 in a billion match between the DNA on the carnation and the man in the handcuffs. The shock arrest is the final collapse of a system that prioritized social standing over the lives of the vulnerable. The brother, Elias, is the wild card in this 40-year cold case. As the forensic team carries out the bins of evidence, Elias stands on the front lawn, a broken man who has spent his entire adult life in the shadow of a secret he was too young to understand, but too old to forget. The detectives are questioning him now, trying to determine how much he knew, and when the realization finally dawned on him, was he an accomplice, or was he another victim of Silas Thorne's perfect tyranny? The Manoir KY law, strange clues in his own life, his refusal to marry, his isolation, his obsessive maintenance of the house after his mother died, all point to a man who was guarding a grave he didn't know he was standing on. The family's darkest secret didn't just claim Elena, it claimed Elias, turning him into a hollowed-out sentinel for a crime that had already destroyed everything he loved. The shocked community looks at him with a mixture of pity and suspicion, wondering if the rot in the Thorne house was a contagious thing that infected everyone who lived there. Back in the vault, the forensic anthropologists have discovered something else, something that wasn't in Martha's diary. Tucked beside the remains of Elena is a small, rusted tin box containing dozens of strange clues from other girls in the area who went missing or were harassed in the early 80s. The family's darkest secret, maybe even larger than a single murder. Silas Thorne might not have been a one-time offender driven by a moment of rage. He might have been a serial predator who used the Thorne legacy as a license to hunt. The cold case of Elena Thorne is the key that is unlocking a dozen other mysterious disappearances that have haunted the state for decades. This shock arrest is just the beginning of a cascading revelation that will turn Silas Thorne from a tragic father into one of the most prolific monsters in the history of the region. This sequined shroud was just the last thing he buried, the final chapter in a long, dark book of secrets. The tension on the street is reaching a breaking point as the first remains are carried out of the house in a specialized forensic casket. A hush falls over the shocked community, a silence so profound you can hear the wind whistling through the maple trees. Elena Thorne is leaving her house for the last time, 40 years late, her sequined dress still shimmering under the black velvet cover of the gurney. The 40-year cold case is being resolved in front of their eyes, a resolution that brings no peace, only a devastating, bone-deep clarity. The mysterious disappearance was never a mystery, it was a domestic arrangement. The family's darkest secret wasn't a secret at all. It was a physical presence that everyone chose to ignore because the truth was too heavy to carry. As the ambulance pulls away, the people of Blackwood are left to stare at the hollowed-out shell of the Thorne house, a monument to the things we refuse to see when they are standing right in front of us. Silas Thorne is currently being held in a high-security facility, his iron mask expression still intact as he faces the first of what will be 100 charges. He hasn't asked for a lawyer. He hasn't asked for a phone call. He only asks for the weather report, as if he is still planning his next day's work in the garden. The shock arrest hasn't broken him because he doesn't believe he was caught. He believes the world simply changed the rules on him. The genetic sniper and the 40-year cold case resolution are just parts of a future he doesn't recognize. To Silas, he is still the captain of the Harvest Ball security team, still the man who keeps the secrets, still the one who controls the earth. But as the Manoir KY law, strange clues continue to pour out of his basement, the world is building a cage for him that is even tighter than the vault he built for his daughter. We are moving toward the final forensic report, toward the moment when the family's darkest secret is laid bare in a courtroom for all to see. The sequins will be held up as evidence. The diary will be read into the record. The shock community will be forced to look Silas Thorne in the eye and admit that they were his greatest achievement, his unwitting accomplices in a 40-year-old lie. The 40-year cold case is solved, but the haunting of Blackwood is just entering its most intense phase. The truth is out, the sequins are shining, and the music, the rhythmic, haunting music of 1986, is finally, mercifully, coming to an end. But as we look at the empty space beneath the master bedroom, we have to wonder, how many other perfect houses are built on foundations of bone? How many other darkest secrets are waiting for the earth to give them up? The nightmare is real, and it is far from over. The fluorescent lights of the county interrogation room don't just illuminate, they strip away the dignity of a 4-decade deception, casting a harsh, unforgiving glare on the man who was once the steel spine of Blackwood. We are moving into the psychological hollows of the Thorne legacy now, past the physical evidence of the basement and into the airless space where Silas Thorne's perfect life is being dismantled by the cold, binary logic of the 2026 digital dragnet. The shock arrest was the explosion, but this quiet, rhythmic questioning is the fallout, a slow-motion demolition of the strong, silent father, myth that protected a monster for 40 years. Silas sits across from the detectives, his hands cuffed but his spirit seemingly unyielding, a relic of a time when secrets could be buried as deep as the frost line and forgotten. But the DNA trap didn't just catch his biological signature, it caught his arrogance. The genetic sniper technology has provided a roadmap of his lineage that makes his silence irrelevant. Every time he refuses to speak, a screen in the corner of the room flashes anew, Manoir KY law, strange clue, a digital reconstruction of a night in 1986 that he thought he had successfully erased from the world's hard drive. The cold case is no longer a mystery to be debated. It is a crime being autopsied in real time, and the family's darkest secret is being read aloud like a death sentence. Outside the precinct, the shock community has morphed into a collective, vengeful entity. The streets of Blackwood are no longer filled with the quiet, respectful mourning of a mysterious disappearance. They are vibrating with the raw, jagged energy of a public betrayal. People are bringing out old newspapers from October 1986, pointing to the photos of Silas leading the search parties, his face a mask of heroic grief that they now recognize as a masterclass in sociopathic camouflage. The realization that they were his greatest defense, that their pity was the concrete that sealed Elena's vault, is a psychological poison that is turning neighbor against neighbor. They're looking for strange clues in their own memories, The way Silas would offer to keep an eye on the neighborhood girls, the way he insisted on patrolling the school grounds alone, the way he was always the first to suggest that the killer must have been an outsider. The darkest secret didn't just live in the Thorne house. It was sheltered by the collective blindness of a town that wanted to believe in the perfect family. This is the anatomy of a communal haunting where the ghosts are not in the woods, but in the handshakes and the neighborly waves that sustained a killer for half a century. The forensic analysis of the tin box found in the basement is now the primary engine of the investigation, moving the 40-year cold case into the terrifying territory of a serial predator's career. Inside that rustic container, the Manoir KY Law, Strange Clues, are a catalog of lives interrupted, a library card from 1979, a friendship bracelet from 1981, a single, tarnished barrette from a girl who disappeared 3 counties away in 1984. Silas Thorne wasn't just a father who snapped in a moment of domestic rage. He was a collector of souls, a man who used his pillar of the community status as a license to hunt. The DNA trap is now being applied to every item in that box, linking Silas to a constellation of cold cases across the state. We are seeing the true scale of the invisible monster, a man who understood the geography of fear so well that he could strike and then return home to mow his lawn and console his grieving wife. The shock community is now realizing that Elena wasn't his only victim. She was just the one he chose to keep closest, the one he buried beneath his own bed as a trophy of his absolute control over his world. Inside the Thorne house, the recovery of Elena's remains has turned into a clinical exhumation of the 1980s. This sequined shroud is being stabilized by preservationists. The silver threads a jarring contrast to the damp, dark earth of the vault. Every sequin is being mapped, every fracture in the concrete floor analyzed to determine the exact moment the sepulchre was sealed. The strange clues are everywhere. A 1986 newspaper used as a spacer between the concrete and the floorboards, a set of work gloves with Silas's initials found tucked into the foundation, and a single, unspent cigarette from a brand that went out of production 30 years ago. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was a project. Silas Thorne built a tomb with the same meticulous care he used to build his reputation. The family's darkest secret was a structural element of the house itself, a secret that supported the weight of their everyday lives. The detectives are realizing that the Thorne family didn't just live with the secret, they lived on top of it, their every dream and every argument happening just inches above the shimmering, sequined evidence of their own destruction. The role of the son, Elias, is becoming the most tragic chapter of the shock arrest narrative. Now that the invisible wall has been torn down, Elias is speaking to investigators in a Dawn Dap, urgent, stream of consciousness that sounds like a dam bursting after 40 years of pressure. He talks about the rules of the house, about the way his father would stand in the master bedroom at night, staring at the floor with a look of terrifying, holy intensity. He describes the strange clues of his childhood, the way he was forbidden from playing in the basement, the way his mother would wake up screaming and Silas would comfort her by whispering that the silence was for the best. Elias is a man who was raised in a graveyard, his identity forged in the heat of a secret he was never allowed to name. The darkest secret didn't just take his sister. It hollowed him out, turning him into a ghost long before he reached adulthood. The shock community watches him from across the street, a man who is finally being allowed to breathe, but who no longer knows how to live in a world without the weight of the floorboards. The media circus surrounding the House of Sequins has reached a fever pitch, with national news anchors standing on the sidewalk of Serenity Lane, their voices a Don Dap, urgent staccato of 40-year cold case, family's darkest secret, and shocked community. They are broadcasting the image of the Thorne house to millions, turning a local tragedy into a global cautionary tale about the limits of human trust. The mysterious disappearance of 1986 is now being reenacted for a digital audience, with strange clues being dissected by armchair detectives on every social media platform. But for the people of Blackwood, this isn't a show, it's a violation. They are the ones who have to live with the knowledge that the monster was a man they invited to their barbecues. They are the ones who have to explain to their children why the perfect neighbor is being led away in chains. The darkest secret has contaminated the very air of the town, leaving a lingering, metallic taste of betrayal that no amount of justice can ever fully wash away. In the basement of the Thorne house, the forensic team has discovered a final, man-wa-ky-law, strange clue, tucked into the very back of the vault. It is a tape recorder, a clunky, plastic relic from 1986. When they play it, the sound that fills the room is the music of the Harvest Ball, a muffled, rhythmic pop song, recorded from the gymnasium floor. But underneath the music, there is a voice. Silas Thorne's voice, calm and instructional, as if he were giving a lecture. "You will stay here," the voice says over the thud of the bass. "You will be the heart of this house. You will be the reason we stay together. The music will never stop as long as you are here." This is the family's darkest secret in its most primal form, a man who viewed the murder of his daughter as a way to fix his family, to create a permanent, unchanging core for his own domestic reality. The cold case wasn't a mystery, it was a sacrifice. The shock arrest is the final, agonizing note of a song that has been playing for 40 years, a song of control, of sequins, and of a silence that was never meant to be broken. The DNA trap has been a total success, but the cost of the resolution is a landscape of emotional debris that will take another 40 years to clear. The Thorne family is gone, the perfect neighbors are unmasked, and Elena Thorne is finally, mercifully, leaving her bedroom for the last time. The 40-year cold case is solved, but the haunting of Serenity Lane, the real Serenity Lane, the one hidden beneath the floorboards, is a story that will never be finished. The truth is here, a cold, shimmering thing that reflects the worst of what we are capable of when we choose to look away. The genetic sniper has found its target, the shock arrest has been made, and the family's darkest secret is now a matter of public record. But as the sun sets over Blackwood, the sequins are still shining in the minds of everyone who lived through the silence, a permanent reminder that the most dangerous monsters are the ones who tell you exactly what you want to hear while they lead you into the dark. The final forensic report on the tin box victims is expected to be released next week, a document that will likely turn Silas Thorne from a local killer into a national nightmare. The man-wa-ky-law, strange clues, are already pointing to unsolved cases as far away as the coast, suggesting that Silas's invisible life was a masterpiece of predatory logistics. The shock community of Blackwood is preparing for a trial that will be less of a legal proceeding and more of an exorcism, a public airing of 40 years of lies and darkest secrets. The cold case is officially closed, but the mysterious disappearance narrative has been replaced by something far more terrifying, the reality of a man who managed to be perfect while holding the world's most harrowing secret. The music of the Harvest Ball has finally faded into static, but the silence that follows is not peaceful. It is the silence of a town that has finally, painfully, learned to see the truth. As the detectives of 2026 pack up their gear and the House of Sequins is boarded up, the air on Serenity Lane is different. It's thinner, colder, as if the secret was the only thing holding the atmosphere together. The 40-year cold case is a headline, a story for a YouTube voiceover, a sequence of data in a forensic database. But for Elena Thorne, it is the end of her long, forced performance. She is no longer the girl in the vault. She is the girl who brought a monster to justice 40 years after he thought he had won. The family's darkest secret is out, the sequins are quiet, and the shock arrest has finally finally, brought the night of the harvest ball to a close. But as we look at the empty windows of the Thorne house, we have to ask, how many other perfect neighbors are standing over foundations they hope we never check? How many other cold cases are just a single silver sequin away from being exhumed? The nightmare is real, and it is right next door. 40-year cold case solved. Family's darkest secret ends in a shock arrest. The digital loom of 2026 does not weave threads of silk or wool. It weaves threads of identity, pulling at the microscopic strands of the past until the family's darkest secret is unspooled in the cold, blue light of a forensic laboratory. We are no longer just looking at a basement in Blackwood. We are looking at the genetic sniper, a high-velocity intersection of public genealogy databases and advanced algorithms that has turned the biological world into a transparent map of crime. The shock arrest of Silas Thorne was not a stroke of luck. It was a mathematical certainty, the result of a DNA trap that began with a distant cousin in a different time zone who uploaded a saliva sample to find their Irish roots, never knowing they were signing a death warrant for a relative they had never met. Inside the cold case unit, the monitors are filled with centimorgan clusters, shared segments of DNA that act like a homing beacon across 40 years of silence. The cold case of Elena Thorne is being solved by people who weren't even born when the sequins first hit the floor, using the strange clues of her own blood to hunt down the man who thought he had outrun the very concept of heritage. The air in the lab is sterile, but the data is visceral, a Don Dap, urgent staccato of genetic matches that is stripping the perfect neighbor of his final, most effective camouflage, his anonymity. Silas Thorne sits in his cell, a man of the analog age trapped in a digital cage. He understands the shovel, the concrete, and the silence, but he does not understand the genetic sniper. He does not understand how his own biological blueprint, scattered through the bodies of distant relatives, could have found its way back to that tin box in his basement. The shock community of Blackwood is watching the news in a state of paralyzed fascination as the police explain the biological broadcast that led to the arrest. Every time a citizen uses a home DNA kit, they are contributing to a global dragnet, a web of truth that has no expiration date. The darkest secret was safe as long as the world was made of paper and film, but in the era of the DNA trap, there is no such thing as a secret. Silas's arrogance, his belief that he was the master of the mysterious disappearance, is being eroded by the realization that his own cells were testifying against him for 4 decades. The strange clues were inside him all along, a rhythmic, pulsing record of his crimes that he could never wash away, no matter how many times he mowed his lawn or painted his house. Inside the Thorne residence, the forensic sweep has moved from the basement to the attic, where the strange clues are becoming even more disturbing. They find a collection of trophies that go beyond the tin box, items that suggest Silas Thorne didn't just kill. He curated a museum of the missing. They find a series of maps from the early 1980s, each one marked with research zones that correspond perfectly with cold cases that have haunted the tri-state area for 40 years. The family's darkest secret is expanding, transforming from a domestic tragedy into a regional nightmare. The shock arrest is just the first domino in a sequence that is connecting Silas to mysterious disappearances that the original investigators never even dreamed of linking. The perfect father was a high-functioning predator who used his respectability as a hunting license, a man who understood that the best place to hide a monster is behind a volunteer badge and a handshake. The cold case of Elena Thorne was the gravity that held his universe together, but now that it's been solved, his entire solar system of secrets is collapsing into a black hole of forensic evidence. The genetic sniper has now identified the victims in the tin box, and the names are hitting the news like hammer blows. Mary Louise Jenkins, Kelly Brennan, Sarah Miller. These were the invisible victims, women whose mysterious disappearances were written off as runaways or accidents because Silas Thorne knew how to choose the ones the system would ignore. The cold case of Elena was different only because he couldn't help himself. He had to bring her home. He had to keep her in the House of Sequins. The darkest secret wasn't just a single act of violence. It was a career of predation that spanned decades and left a trail of strange clues that were only visible to a machine that could see into the past. The shock arrest is providing closure for families who had long ago given up hope, but the closure is a brutal, jagged thing. They are finding out that their daughters weren't at the bottom of a river or in a distant city. They were in the basement of a perfect man, their memories stored in a rusted box behind a pile of old magazines. In the interrogation room, the DNA trap is finally being sprung in its most personal form. Detective Sarah Jenkins, whose family was part of the 1986 search party, places the sequin shroud in a sterile container on the table. The sequins didn't turn to dust, Silas, she says, her voice a dawn dap, urgent, whisper that fills the small room. They're still shining. They're reflecting the light of 2026. They're telling us exactly what you did in that parking lot. They're telling us how you carried her into this house. They're telling us why Martha stopped speaking. Silas looks at the silver threads, and for the first time, the perfect neighbor looks old. He looks small. The invisible monster is being replaced by a frail, broken man who is finally being forced to carry the weight of his own darkest secret. The shock arrest hasn't just ended his freedom, it has ended his legend. He is no longer the master of the cold case. He is just another subject of the genetic sniper, a biological error that has been corrected by the passage of time and the persistence of the truth. The House of Sequins is currently being dismantled with surgical precision. The forensic teams are not just looking for bodies, they are looking for the strange clues of Silas's logistics. They find a hidden room in the garage, a soundproof space that was built in 1987, just months after the mysterious disappearance of Elena. It is filled with cold case files, not official ones, but his own personal notes on every girl who went missing in a 50-mile radius. He was a student of his own crimes, a man who obsessed over the strange clues he left behind, refining his technique until he became invisible. The family's darkest secret was a full-time occupation, a project that required constant maintenance and absolute control. The detectives are realizing that the Thorne family didn't just have a secret, they had a system. Martha wasn't just a silent witness. She was the archivist of a nightmare, her diary the only record of a shocked community that was being systematically hunted by one of its own. The role of Elias Thorne in this 40-year cold case is becoming the most complex piece of the puzzle. As the genetic sniper confirms his identity and his presence in the house during the 1986 investigation, the question remains, what did the boy see? Elias is now being treated as a witness of trauma, a man whose entire development was stunted by the darkest secret. He tells the investigators about the rhythm of the floor, about the way his father would tap out a sequence on the bedroom floorboards every night, a rhythmic, dawn-dap, urgent code that Elias thought was a game, but now realizes was a communication with the grave. The strange clues of his childhood are being reinterpreted through the lens of the shock arrest, turning his memories into evidence. He describes the way the house always felt crowded, even when it was just the three of them, as if the mysterious disappearance of his sister had actually made her more present in every room. The media coverage of the shock arrest is now focusing on the genetic sniper as a hero of modern justice, a digital avenger that can solve any cold case. But for the people of Blackwood, the DNA trap is a terrifying reminder of their own exposure. They realize that their lives are no longer private, that their secrets are etched into their very blood, waiting for a shock arrest of their own. The darkest secret of the Thorne family has become a mirror for the shock community, reflecting the hidden shames and strange clues that everyone carries. The House of Sequins is a monument to the failure of trust, a reminder that the perfect neighbor is a fiction that we create to help us sleep at night. As the forensic teams carry out the final boxes of evidence, the cold case of Elena Thorne is officially marked as solved, but the mysterious disappearance of Blackwood's innocence is a tragedy that will never have a resolution. We are moving toward the final hearing, toward the moment when the genetic sniper results are entered into the permanent record and Silas Thorne is sentenced for a lifetime of invisible evil. This sequined shroud will be the primary witness. Its silver threads a glowing testimony to a night in 1986 that finally reached its conclusion in 2026. The family's darkest secret is now a matter of public record, a Don Dapp, urgent, narrative of domestic horror that has redefined the cold case genre. The shock community is beginning to heal, but the scars are deep, and the strange clues of the Thorne legacy will haunt the streets of Blackwood for generations. The music of the Harvest Ball has finally stopped, but the silence that follows is not one of peace. It is the heavy, expectant silence of a world that knows the genetic sniper is always watching, always waiting for the next darkest secret to be revealed. The investigation is now moving into the legacy sweep, where every cold case in the state is being reevaluated for a potential connection to Silas Thorne. The Manwa KY law, strange clues, found in the attic are being cross-referenced with the DNA trap results, creating a digital dragnet that is pulling dozens of mysterious disappearances into the light. The shock arrest of one man has led to the resolution of a generation's worth of pain, a cascading sequence of truth that is as overwhelming as it is necessary. The House of Sequins is a shell, its secrets exhumed, its floors torn up, its silence broken. But as we look at the empty space where the master bedroom used to be, we have to ask, how many other perfect neighbors are standing over foundations of bone? How many other darkest secrets are waiting for the genetic sniper to find them? The 40-year cold case is solved, but the shock community will never look at a white picket fence the same way again. The truth is here, a cold, molecular thing that has no mercy for the secrets of the past. The sequins are shining, the blood is speaking, and the shock arrest is just the beginning of the final reckoning. The final image of the week is of Elias Thorne, standing at the edge of the property as the House of Sequins is finally boarded up. He is holding a single silver sequin in his hand, a strange clue he found in the dirt after the forensic teams left. He looks at the shock community gathered across the street, and for the first time in 40 years, he doesn't look away. He is the survivor of the family's darkest secret, the man who lived through the mysterious disappearance and came out on the other side. The cold case is over, the shock arrest is made, and the genetic sniper has done its job. But the silence of Blackwood is different now. It's no longer the silence of a secret. It's the silence of a town that has finally, painfully, learned to see the truth. The sequins are quiet now, but they will never stop shining in the memory of a shock community that finally found its daughter. As the sun sets on Serenity Lane, the 40-year cold case solved headline begins to fade from the news cycle, replaced by the next mysterious disappearance, the next shock arrest, the next darkest secret. But for the people of Blackwood, the story will never fade. It is etched into the very soil of the town, a permanent Manwa KY law, strange clue that reminds them of the night the music died and the 40 years it took for the sequins to find their way home. The genetic sniper is still scanning the horizon, the DNA trap is still waiting, and the shock arrest is always just one saliva sample away. The family's darkest secret is out, and the world is finally ready to move on, but the House of Sequins will always be there, a haunting reminder that the most dangerous secrets are the ones that stay in the light, waiting for the future to catch up. The 40-year cold case is over, but the reckoning has just begun. The story of Elena Thorne is a story of the invisible power of the truth, a Don Dapp, urgent reminder that no matter how deep you bury a secret, the earth will eventually give it up. The genetic sniper is the ultimate witness, the shock arrest the ultimate resolution, and the family's darkest secret the ultimate tragedy. But in the end, it is the sequins that we remember, the small, silver fragments of a 19-year-old girl's dreams that refuse to stay in the dark. The cold case is solved, the mysterious disappearance is explained, and the shocked community is finally at peace. Or as at peace as a town can be when it knows that the perfect neighbor was a monster and that the darkest secret was right there all along, hidden under the bed of a man who called himself a father. The music is gone, the sequins are quiet, and the 40-year cold case is finally, mercifully, closed. The courtroom of Blackwood is a hollowed-out cathedral of judicial silence, a place where the air is thick with the metallic tang of 1986 and the pressurized hum of a global audience waiting for the final collapse of a 40-year-old lie. We are no longer just examining a basement on Serenity Lane. We are performing a public autopsy on the social architecture of an entire town, a shocking community, realization that the monster didn't just hide, he led. The genetic sniper has provided the biological blueprint, but the strange clues currently being entered into the legal record reveal something far more terrifying. Silas Thorne didn't just commit a murder. He engineered a reality. As the prosecution opens the heavy, leather-bound ledgers of the Blackwood Neighborhood Watch from October 1986, the ink-stained pages show the handwriting of a man who was using his authority to map the very search efforts he was sabotaging. This is the moment the cold case becomes a mirror, reflecting a betrayal so deep it feels like a physical violation of the town's soul. Silas Thorne wasn't just a strong, silent father. He was the primary investigator of his own crime, a predator who wore a badge of trust while he buried the light of his life beneath his own bed. Every Manoir KY law, strange clue, in these logs, the reported sightings of drifters, the suspicious noises in the woods that he personally cleared, this strange car with the out-of-state plates, was a fictionalized script written to lead this shocking community further into the dark. Inside the courtroom, the genetic sniper data is displayed on massive screens, a glowing, neon web of biological certainty that makes Silas Thorne look like a relic of a primitive age. The DNA trap has mapped the centimorgan clusters that link him to the tin box victims, a biological trail of breadcrumbs that leads back to his summer hunting trips disguised as historical research. The strange clues in his travelogues from the early 80s show a man who is obsessed with the geography of the invisible, choosing towns that lacked professional police forces, towns that were paralyzed by their own sense of safety, towns just like Blackwood. He was a student of the system, a man who understood that a mysterious disappearance is only mysterious if you provide enough distractions. He would leave Manoir KY law, strange clues at his crime scenes, a discarded cigarette, a torn piece of fabric, deliberate errors designed to keep the local authorities chasing phantoms while he returned home to play the role of the devoted husband and father. The shocking community is seeing the ledger of a professional ghost, a man who treated human life as a variable in an equation of control. The psychological profile being presented to the jury is a harrowing descent into the family's darkest secret, a revelation of a domestic life that was a mirror image of a high-security prison. Martha Thorne's diary, the ledger of guilt, is being read aloud, her words a jagged, Don Dapp, urgent scream from the past that silences the room. Silas says the town needs a tragedy. One entry from November 1986 reads, he says that without Elena's empty chair, the neighbors would stop looking at us. He says the silence is a gift he gave me, so I wouldn't have to hear her grow up and leave me. This is the darkest secret in its most visceral form. A man who viewed the murder of his daughter as a way to perfect his family, to ensure that his wife and son would never, ever escape his orbit. He didn't just kill Elena, he killed the possibility of a future that he couldn't control. The mysterious disappearance was the cage he built for Martha and Elias, a cage made of strange clues and public sympathy that kept them locked in a permanent, October 1986 stasis. The atmosphere in Blackwood is one of a shocking community in the throes of a violent awakening. Every resident who ever brought a casserole to the Thorne house, every officer who ever shared a cup of coffee with Silas during a search, is now being forced to confront their own role in his invisible reign. They are finding strange clues in their own attic of memories, the way Silas would check in on widows, the way he would offer to supervise the youth center, the way he was always there to help when someone was at their most vulnerable. He was the architect of their safety, a man who understood that the best way to hide a monster is to make him the one who hunts the monster. The cold case of Elena Thorne wasn't a failure of the police. It was a victory of social camouflage. Silas Thorne used the very virtues of Blackwood, its kindness, its neighborliness, its trust, as the tools of his trade. The shocking community is now a community of strangers, each person wondering if the perfect neighbor across the street is currently writing a mysterious disappearance of their own. The genetic sniper is now moving into the legacy analysis, linking Silas to cold cases that date back to the late 1960s, a timeline that suggests he has been a predator since his own high school graduation. The strange clues found in his high school yearbooks, the mysteriously missing pages, the photos of him standing in the back of every group, his eyes always fixed on the camera with a chilling, predatory focus, reveal a man who was born in the shadows and spent 50 years perfecting the art of the invisible kill. The family's darkest secret is no longer just about the Thorne household. It is about a generational trauma that has haunted the state for half a century. Silas Thorne is the common denominator in a sequence of tragedies that were written off as Manoir KY law, strange clues, and mysterious disappearances. He was the phantom in the parking lot, the shadow in the woods, and the perfect neighbor who waved at you while you searched for the very people he had taken. The shocking community is watching the exhumation of 50 years of failure, a cold case resolution that is as devastating as it is necessary. As the prosecution enters the final phase of the trial, the sequined shroud is brought into the courtroom, a shimmering, silver witness to the night the music died. The sequins catch the harsh light of the 2026 digital projectors, casting a dancing, spectral glow across the faces of the jury, a visual echo of the harvest ball that has finally reached its destination. The strange clues of the dress, the way it was folded, the way the sequins were used to seal the plastic wrap, reveal the obsessive, ritualistic nature of Silas's crimes. He didn't just hide her, he preserved her as a monument to his own perfection. The cold case was his masterpiece, a mysterious disappearance that he curated with the same care he gave his historical archives. The shocking community is silent. The only sound the rhythmic, don-dap, urgent, clicking of the court reporter's keys, a sound that mimics the heartbeat of a town that is finally, painfully, beginning to beat again. Elena Thorne isn't a ghost anymore. She is the evidence that is finally, irrevocably, breaking the back of the family's darkest secret. The shock arrest has turned Silas Thorne into a specimen of human evil, a man who is being studied by forensic psychologists and criminal profilers as the ultimate, invisible predator. He doesn't look at the sequins. He doesn't look at the photos of the tin box victims. He only looks at his own hands, his calloused, mill worker hands that built a sepulcher in a bedroom and a lie in a town. The strange clues of his behavior in the cell, his meticulous cleaning of his own space, his rhythmic tapping on the metal table, his refusal to eat anything that wasn't perfectly prepared, reveal a man who is still obsessed with control, even in the heart of his own destruction. The darkest secret hasn't broken him because he doesn't believe he was caught. He believes he was betrayed by a future he couldn't control. The DNA trap and the genetic sniper are the only variables he couldn't manipulate, the only strange clues he couldn't erase with a shovel and a handshake. He is a monster of the analog age, being dismantled by the digital light of 2026, and the shocking community is watching every second of the autopsy. The trial is reaching its climax, a Don Dapp, urgent sequence of testimony from the survivors of Silas's invisible career. Families from 3 different decades are sitting in the gallery, their faces a mosaic of grief and a newfound, terrifying clarity. They're hearing the names of their daughters, their sisters, their friends, linked to the Manwa KY law, strange clues found in the Thorne basement. The cold case of Elena Thorne has become the center of a solar system of tragedies, a gravity that is finally pulling every mysterious disappearance into the sun. The family's darkest secret is now the world's most harrowing lesson in the limits of trust. The shocking community of Blackwood will never be the same, but as the sequins continue to shine in the courtroom light, there is a sense of a long, dark night finally beginning to end. The sequins are not just fabric. They're a language, a testimony, a Don Dapp, urgent, message from 1986 that the truth is a DNA trap that eventually catches everyone. As the sun sets over the courthouse, casting long, skeletal shadows across the faces of the shocking community, waiting outside, the air in Blackwood is different. It's no longer the heavy, stagnant air of a mysterious disappearance. It's the cold, clear air of a cold case solved. The sequins are quiet. The darkest secret is loud. The shock arrest is final. We are moving toward the verdict, toward the moment when the invisible man is finally given a permanent, public name. The 40-year cold case of Elena Thorne is over, but the haunting of Serenity Lane is a story that will be whispered in the corners of every perfect town for the next 40 years. The sequins are shining, the blood is speaking, and the truth, the cold, shimmering, 2026 truth, is finally, mercifully, home. The music of the Harvest Ball has faded into the silence of justice, and as the courtroom doors swing shut, the only thing left in the dark is the memory of a girl in a silver dress who refused to be forgotten. The 40-year cold case is solved, and the family's darkest secret is now a scream that will never be silenced again. The witness stand in the Blackwood County Courthouse is a lonely island of mahogany and grief, and today, it is occupied by the man who lived 40 years in the heart of the darkest secret without ever being allowed to scream. Elias Thorne, now 52, looks like a man who has been exhumed alongside his sister, his face a landscape of hollowed-out memories and a stuttering, desperate need for the light. We are no longer just watching a trial. We are witnessing the final psychological collapse of a family built on a foundation of bone and sequins. The shocked community leans forward in the gallery, their breath held in a collective, rhythmic prayer as Elias begins to speak about the strange clues of a childhood spent in a house where the floorboards were a boundary between the living and the dead. This is the cold case from the perspective of the survivor, the 12-year-old boy who grew up to be the sentinel of a grave he wasn't supposed to know existed. His voice is a Don Dapp, urgent, fragile thread of sound that pulls the courtroom back to the winter of 1986, to the nights when the mysterious disappearance of Elena was the only conversation, and the silence in the Thorne household was the only answer. Elias speaks of the rules of the shadows, the unspoken mandates that governed every movement within the Thorne estate. He describes the way Silas would stand at the head of the hallway every night at 3 a.m., a silhouette carved from the darkness, listening to the house as if he were waiting for the wood itself to confess. This wasn't the behavior of a grieving father, it was the behavior of a jailer. Elias recounts the Manwa KY law, strange clues that the 1986 investigators never asked about, the way the master bedroom door was always locked from the inside, the way his mother, Martha, would scrub the kitchen floor until her fingers bled, as if she were trying to wash away a stain that was beneath the surface. The shocked community hears the details of a domestic life that was a mirror image of a high-security prison, a place where the darkest secret was the only currency and the price of admission was your soul. The genetic sniper has provided the DNA, but Elias is providing the atmosphere, the thick, suffocating reality of living with an invisible monster who called you son and tucked you into bed with hands that had just finished mixing concrete. The prosecution introduces a new piece of evidence, a 2026 acoustic reconstruction of the Thorne house, a digital map that shows how sound traveled through the floorboards and the ventilation shafts. They play a simulation of the rhythm of the floor that Elias described, the rhythmic, dawn-dap, urgent, tapping that Silas would perform every night over the vault. The sound fills the courtroom, a heavy, mechanical heartbeat that sounds like a clock counting down to a murder. It is the sound of the darkest secret, asserting its dominance over the quiet of Serenity Lane. The shock community flinches as the bass vibrates through the benches, a physical manifestation of the 40-year haunting. This wasn't a man mourning a loss. This was a man celebrating a conquest. Silas Thorne, sitting at the defense table, doesn't look at his son. He doesn't look at the screens. He only stares at the mahogany railing of the witness stand, his fingers tapping that same rhythmic code, a chilling, reflexive gesture that proves he is still living in 1986, still the master of the mysterious disappearance. The defense attempts to cross-examine Elias, trying to paint him as a victim of false memories, a man whose mind was poisoned by the genetic sniper headlines and the shock community hysteria. They point to his years of isolation, his refusal to leave the Thorne estate, as evidence of a fragile mental state. But Elias doesn't break. He meets the defense attorney's gaze with a clarity that is born of 40 years of suppressed truth. "I didn't need a DNA test to know what was under the bed," he whispers, his voice cutting through the legal jargon like a blade. "I felt the cold coming up through the floor. I saw the way my mother looked at the shovel. I lived in the cold case, while you all just read about it in the papers." The Manwa KY law, strange clues, are no longer open to interpretation. They are the lived experience of a man who was the secondary victim of Silas's invisible career. The shock arrest was the end of his physical imprisonment, but the trial is the exorcism of his mind. The genetic sniper technology is then brought back into focus, linking the DNA from the tin box victims to the soil samples taken from the Harvest Ball parking lot. The forensic experts describe the microbial signature of the Thorne basement, a unique bacterial profile that matches the biological traces found on the victims who disappeared in the early 80s. The strange clues of the earth itself are now testifying against Silas Thorne. The family's darkest secret wasn't just a domestic affair, it was an ecological disaster of the soul. He brought the world into his house and buried it. The cold case of Elena was just the centerpiece of a larger gallery of horrors, a mysterious disappearance that he used to validate his own presence in the community. Every time he led a search party, he was actually scouting for new, strange clues to hide, new, invisible paths to take. The shock community is seeing the anatomy of a predator who didn't just hide in the light. He was the one who controlled the light. The prosecution moves to the October 24, 1986 timeline, using the genetic sniper to reconstruct the exact path Elena took from the gymnasium to the parking lot. They show the acoustic footprint of a struggle that was muffled by the pop music of the Harvest Ball, a dawn-dap, urgent sequence of movements that ended at the Thorne's sensible sedan. The strange clues of the car's maintenance records from that week, the sudden need for a professional interior detail, the replacement of the trunk liner, the mysteriously missing spare tire, are all laid out like a deck of cards. The perfect father didn't just kill her, he erased her with the same meticulous attention to detail he gave his history lectures. The family's darkest secret was a logistical masterpiece, a cold case that stayed cold because Silas Thorne understood that the best way to hide a body is to make it a part of the house. The shock community realizes that they were his greatest asset. Their belief in his perfect life was the primary obstacle to the truth. The atmosphere in the gallery is reaching a fever pitch as the prosecution plays the final recorded statement of Martha Thorne, taken just days before her natural death 10 years ago. Her voice is a fragile, ghostly rasp, a dawn dap, urgent confession that was kept under seal until the DNA trap provided the necessary corroboration. He told me it was an accident, she whispers through the static of the old tape. He told me she tripped, that the sequins got caught, that it was a tragedy we had to manage for the sake of the boy. But then he started digging. He didn't dig like a man in a panic. He dug like a man who was finally doing what he was born to do. The mysterious disappearance wasn't a lie to him. It was his favorite story. This is the darkest secret in its final, most devastating form. The revelation that the perfect neighbor viewed his daughter's death as an opportunity to manifest his true, invisible nature. The shock community is silent. The only sound the rhythmic tapping of Silas's fingers on the table, a sound that now sounds like the ticking of a bomb. The genetic sniper provides the final, man-wa ky law, strange clue, of the afternoon, a link between Silas Thorne and a cold case from 1969, a young woman named Clara Vance who disappeared from a nearby college campus. This is the ancestral root of his predation, a mysterious disappearance that predates his marriage and his move to Blackwood. The family's darkest secret didn't start in 1986. It was the continuation of a 50-year-old narrative of invisible evil. Silas Thorne was a predator of the old world, a man who thought he could outrun the future by staying in the shadows of the past. But the DNA trap of 2026 has no respect for timelines. It has found the strange clues in his very blood, a biological record of a lifetime of horror that is finally being read into the permanent record. The shock arrest was not the end. It was the beginning of a cascading revelation that is turning the strong, silent father into the most prolific monster in the history of the state. As Elias Thorne steps down from the witness stand, he pauses for a second and looks at his father. For the first time in 40 years, the power dynamic has shifted. Elias is no longer the 12-year-old boy in the hallway. He is the man who broke the family's darkest secret. He walks past the defense table, his head held high, leaving Silas Thorne to face the genetic sniper alone. The shock community watches in a state of profound, vibrating grief, realizing that the cold case of Elena Thorne was just the tip of an iceberg that has finally, irrevocably, breached the surface. The sequins are shining in the courtroom light, the blood is speaking through the digital displays, and the mysterious disappearance is being replaced by a shock arrest that will resonate through the history of Blackwood for the next 40 years. The 40-year cold case is solved, but the reckoning is just beginning, and the music of the harvest ball is finally, mercifully, fading into the silence of the truth. The court recesses for the day, but the shock community remains in the plaza outside, their faces illuminated by the blue and red flashes of the news crews. They talk in Don Dap, urgent, whispers about the strange clues, about Elias's testimony, and about the DNA trap that finally caught the invisible man. They realized that the darkest secret wasn't just Silas's, it was a secret they all kept by choosing not to see. The cold case is no longer a mystery to be debated in the local diner. It is a weight they must all carry. The mysterious disappearance of Elena Thorne has been solved, but the shocking community of Blackwood will never be the same. The sequins are out of the vault is out of the bedroom, and the family's darkest secret is now the headline that will define them forever. The 40-year cold case is over, but the haunting of Serenity Lane has only just begun to reach its most intense phase. The truth is here, and it is a cold, sequined thing that will never let them look at a perfect neighbor the same way again. Such a sorrow. The pen is